Good afternoon to everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. By the way, I am Mac Lawrence Bensal, head of the AmCham Center for Training and Development. It's very unfortunate that we're having our meeting here, our training here virtually. We actually didn't have a chance to do our debut yet, but here we are offering our online courses and lectures to aid you in these challenging times. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone for taking time to join us in this webinar. I assure each and everyone that this is a great opportunity for you to learn how can you cope up with the changes and adjust to the new normal brought about by this disruptor. And as you may also know, this is a unique time in our history, the time that doesn't allow us to be together in our famous AmCham Hall, but we are grateful that many of us are staying home and staying safe, and in doing so, keeping each other safe. AmCham would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and honor the sacrifices of those who work every day, tirelessly taking care of our communities in this time of need and uncertainty. The people who are making our daily lives possible. The Chamber also hopes that all of us will continue to support our frontliners and our LGUs and each other in all our efforts to contain the spread of this disease. With that, I will now turn over the floor to our Executive Director, Mr. Hinchliffe, to welcome everyone and to give us some chamber updates as well. Sir?
Yes, welcome everybody. So glad you could join us for a Friday afternoon. It's under different circumstances than we would normally do it. A big shout out and thanks to Mac for putting this together, and of course to June and Elaine, Jeremy for their participation today as the instructors on this online training. We look very much forward to the day when we can get back to something more normal and be back in AmCham Hall. I had a meeting with my team this morning, and I notified them that it's most likely that AmCham would probably not reopen. We'll be continuing to work from home until at least June. So it'll be the month of May, unless something changes that we are not seeing at this moment. We'll continue to do our very successful work from home program. Our team is constantly busy. This is about the 6th or 7th webinar meeting we've had this week. We'll continue to have another 4 or 5 next week. So hope you'll continue to pay attention to your emails, your inboxes, and continue to join us for these type of meetings. It's so valuable. It's one way to keep us in touch as we're all kind of locked down in our own little world. It's great to being social animals we are. It's great to be able to have this kind of deal where we can at least have some sense of normality and social interaction with each other. But if there's anything that American Chamber can do to help you or assist you, I hope most of you have my phone number. Most of you have my email address. If there's anything the Chamber or myself can do to help you during these times, just please let us know. With that, again, just welcome. Thanks to Jim Marfori and his team for today's session. And back at you, Mac.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Just a few reminders to everyone before we move on to our program. Please note that all questions should be entered in the Q&A section that you may see at the bottom part of your screens. There's a small Q&A letters. And if you wish to be heard and speak, please let us know by clicking the raise your hand button beside the Q&A section below. Also note that all the questions will be entertained after both of our presenters are through with their talk. So now, to introduce our speaker, may I turn over the program to Mr. June Marfori, Director and Co-founder of POWERinU Philippines.
Thank you, Mac.
Thank
and
you.
Once again, Eb, thank you very much to the American Chamber of Commerce for giving us this opportunity to talk, well, not only to partner with the Chamber, but to talk about a very critical topic or a couple of topics this afternoon, which we believe are essential and critical, not only at this present time, but even as we brace for the period to come after what we believe would be what we call the new normal. And that is in the process of settlement and being redefined every day as we know it. So Mac, I'll just share my screen at this time to give a very brief introduction to POWERinU so that we can go straight away to our resource speakers who are the best position to make good use of your time this afternoon. Can you confirm, Mac, that you can see the screen?
Yes, yes, we do.
The PowerPoint, rather?
Yes.
Okay. So in partnership with the American Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, we'd like to bring to you a couple of resource speakers this afternoon coming from POWERinU Training and Coaching Philippines. And very briefly, we'd like to talk about who we are, what has brought us together, what is our mission, what resonates with us, and why do we do what we do. And in the process, talk about our expertise, what are solutions and the programs that we provide. And then I'll go straight away and introduce our first speaker. POWERinU is a lean organization. 5 of us came together in early 2016 because of what resonated with us and which continues to flow in our veins, so to speak, which is a common mission to partner with organizations and to be able to enable them to deliver strong business results by enhancing their talent and leadership through our value-adding strategic consulting solutions. We believe in the formula that effective partnership together with our value-adding solutions would equate to enhanced leadership in the entities we partner with and drive stronger business results. What brought us together is a common desire to ask the question from organizations we speak and interact with, which would go either, what keeps you awake at night? Or what do you think you need to bring you to the next level of desired stronger business results or sustainable business results? And I must say that this, should we say, formula has effectively helped our organizations, partner organizations and clients over the last 4 years in terms of bringing the desired results for them, which has been beneficial for us as well. Just over the last 3 or 3.5 years, we have actually trained over 6,200 managers through over 240 programs that we have delivered. This would include those that we have delivered in-house, some public programs, including some online programs. And this is counting only those that we have actually provided training delivery services, or we have been engaged for training services for, and does not count the number of clients and individuals and entities that have benefited from our coaching programs, as well as our coaching expertise and capabilities. Earlier, I said that we look at our clients, we speak with them, and we ask them, what is it that you desire? Where do you want to go next? Or what keeps you awake at night, so to speak? Briefly, when you look at what we are capable of doing, we put consulting as number 1, precisely because that we believe is the value that we can provide. Coaching, as a result of our consultant, coaches, directors, capabilities, certifications, previous experience is also among our specialized offerings in the area of life, executive, corporate leadership, and success coaching, not only for individuals, but also for groups or corporations. We have effectively conducted online and face-to-face coaching courses, as well as sessions for entry-level, mid-level, senior levels, and up, as well as have run public coaching programs. In partnership and collaboration with global and regional learning organizations and consultants, training also happens to be one of our key expertise. And as a testament to that, we've spoken about how the number of programs that we have run in the last 3.5 years and the number of people who have actually undergone training. So in brief, POWERinU is a company that brings to you this afternoon a partnership with the American Chamber of Commerce, and we hope and we aspire that all those who are in this webinar will stand to benefit, as many of our long-standing clients have done as well. And so we bring to you this afternoon a couple of speakers who will speak respectively about their designated themes. Let me just very quickly introduce our first speaker, and she's Elaine Cercado, who is based out of Singapore, and actually is one of the 5 of us who have formed POWERinU in the Philippines. She will speak about managing organizational changes in times of crisis. She's driven by her mission to discover, develop, maximize, and share the POWERinU. She actually founded POWERinU Training Coaching in Singapore in 2008. That is following almost 20 years of working in various senior and regional leadership roles in multinational organizations, where she had an opportunity to specialize in sales, business management, and regional general management. And henceforth, she embarked on her second career in training, consulting, and coaching in Singapore, where she has been based for the last 20 years as well. Together with the rest of us, she formed the POWERinU in the Philippines, and we share the same mission and values. She's a globally certified leadership and management trainer, a certified practicing management consultant in Singapore, and a certified executive coach. You can see some of the global companies that she has served, an array of multinational companies based in Singapore and all over Asia, as well as outside of the Asian continent. And to journey with individuals, teams, and organizations to grow and to find purposeful and sustainable success remains Elaine's lifelong mission. With that, to our dear audience, without further ado, I hand over the floor to Elaine Cercado.
Thank you, June. Let me just share my slides. I hope you can see them. So thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored and happy to share in today's webinar. A friend the other day actually just sent this to me. The world is closed for renovation. Grand reopening soon. The COVID-19 crisis has indeed changed the world in our lives. You know, everything has changed. Just a few weeks ago, all of us were living our very busy lives. And we were just talking earlier before the start of the webinar, there were many things that we probably have taken for granted: an evening with friends, the daily commute, the plane flight, back to our countries or to travels. They're no longer possible right now. So in addition, there is, of course, the immediate concern of the very real impact on our lives, the human lives, and about the economy and the businesses, of course, that may result from a prolonged battle with the COVID-19. So businesses have been declining and people are losing their jobs. So the important question is, how are we doing with this renovation? When will that grand reopening be? How will the new world look like when it reopens? Are we ready to live in this new world, the new normal, as we've been calling it? So to try to answer some of these questions, I'll try to share some of the studies that have been coming out globally. I've synthesized them and just picked out the highlights which I think are relevant for this webinar session. Let me just show you that. So we'll start with the key insights about the crisis and how will the next normal look like according to the experts. And then we will go into managing the business and organizational changes. What are the initial business as usual issues? And then from there, what are the more complex future issues in the new normal? From there, we will go into specific steps that we can take as leaders, as managers in our businesses, in our departments, with our teams. And I will just share briefly a minute and a half kind of video that shows about what Singapore has done as well in terms of coming out with a solidarity and resilience package or plan. And thirdly, we'll cover a section that goes into managing change, managing crisis. What must we do to build organizational capacity for continuous change? In today's, continuously changing world, the VUCA world. So let's get started. This was the map as of April 3rd, 2020. And of course, it continues to change as we talk. But this shows that the virus has spread worldwide despite containment efforts. In fact, as of yesterday, this was, I picked this up from Channel News Asia, and this was the latest. We've hit over 2 million confirmed cases globally and 133,000 over in terms of reported death. And so it looks like it's still not contained. But on the other hand, there are also good news that we are seeing now in the headlines globally and even at the ASEAN level, the Asia Pacific level. For instance, one of the headlines I read yesterday was that Germany will be easing and will be reopening by May 3rd. Several EU countries as well are now trying different ways to ease the restrictions. But they also warn that it will be a long way to go before normal life resumes in Europe, and especially in big economies like Germany. And they say that the economic activity would continue to be very subdued and would only pick up gradually. From here, I will share a couple of insights, coming out of the COVID-19 crisis, not really coming out yet or easing into this transition into the new normal. What are some of the key insights so that we might understand better what the new normal might look like? Before I go through this, what looks like a complex slide, there are 3 questions that are usually asked by global leaders or those in power and authority, in the government. One is the depth of disruption. How deep are the demand reductions? 2 is the length of disruption. How long could the disruption last? And 3rd is the shape of recovery. What shape could recovery take? And so with those 3 key questions, one of the key insights that have come out is that it is imperative to time box the virus. We must think about how to suppress the virus and shorten the duration of the economic shock, which is estimated right now globally at -8 to -13. And so the imperative of our time, number 1, is to safeguard our lives. And primary or most important to that would be suppressing the virus as fast as possible, expanding the treatment and finding cure. We're all waiting for that great news about the cure, that vaccine. And the second imperative is safeguarding our lives, supporting people and businesses affected by lockdowns, preparing to get back to work safely, and preparing to scale the recovery of the economy. Another insight that has come out based on an article, Beyond Coronavirus, the Path to the Next Normal, is this. We call it the 5R, leading from the crisis of today to the next normal. It says leaders need to think and act across 5 horizons. In fact, they say the assumptions and the metrics that we knew or have known are now irrelevant. we now ask the same questions that we ask our grandparents. What did you do during the war? So today requires a different answer. And so global experts have now come out with what they call the 5 Rs. First is to resolve, resilience, return, reimagine, reform. So resolve, to be able to address the immediate challenges that COVID-19 represents to the institution's workforce, customers, technology, and business partners. Resilience is to address near-term cash management challenges. Return is how to create a detailed plan, to return the business back to scale quickly as the virus evolves and knocks on effects. Evolves and knock-on effects become clearer. Reimagine is to reimagine the next normal. And then reform is to be clear about the regulatory and the industry shifts that may come out. And managing across these 5 Rs would be what they call a nerve center. So nerve center would be a team of teams, basically 4 teams, to deliver what the priorities are, to decide on the specific actions, to discover possible scenarios, and to design strategies. Okay, so we'll go back to this concept of the 5R and the nerve center later on, but let me just show a few examples of the return and the reimagine. Okay, this seems like a busy slide, but actually, let me just focus on this specific actions at the bottom right. So in terms of specific actions that companies, organizations, or institutions are doing as a sample of a return plan. So some examples, and companies could be in different phases. Those who are going through, say, a partial continuation might have actions in terms of physical distancing, of having clear protection guidelines. Phased opening could be, if your company is under phased opening, you could be having reassurance measures, safety and protection policies. And if you are in the fiscal recovery, you could have targeted outreach to customers, clear safeguard protocols, deep cleaning of the office space. And if you are finally in that recovery and preparedness stage, you could be developing more robust work from home policies, reducing the number of large gatherings, and of course, reviewing travel policies. Note though that these actions are building blocks. They can be rolled out and they can be sequenced according to their respective realities. Okay, so because every company, every organization, every institution might vary in terms of which phase and which actions can they take. Reimagine the next normal and the industry reform. And I believe Jeremy later on, our next speaker, will explain this. In fact, we'll talk about this in more detail, but let me just show you what is being reimagined as the next normal in terms of the organization, in terms of where work happens, how people are organized, how decisions are made, and about the workforce size and the composition. Let me take the middle part of it and perhaps talk about the right part, which is when the drastic or the extreme change could happen. Okay, so in terms of where work happens, remote working will definitely be enabled or are already enabled, but most professions will still be in person. On the right side, there is a scenario where remote working will be fully accepted, meaning 25% of white-collar labor will be fully remote, and that would include traditional, jobs that we usually see in person, like radiologists, financial analysts, and consultants. In terms of how people are organized, certain BUs will be organized into networks of project-based work. This one, I believe most multinationals and probably some large corporations who have invested in the infrastructures are already practicing. But we will see that happening more and more. And on the right side, leaner and more agile structure, leveraging the gig economy for project-based execution. In terms of how decisions are made, there will be more empowered teams. And this is something that will happen more and more. This has been happening, and probably this will also impact not just the large corporations, but a lot of from the small to the medium to the large corporations. Strategy will remain centrally set and coordinated, but all operational decisions will be decentralized for speed and for that agile mentality. And then in terms of the workforce size and composition, management will remain full-time, non-management will shift to what we call the gig workers. And again, I believe Jeremy will talk more about the gig economy and the gig workers later on. So I'll not preempt this, but one of the trends that will come out as the next normal is that gig economy will be fully utilized. We'll have workers working in the gig economy more and more. In fact, the prediction is that less than 20% of labor force only will remain full-time. So very interesting, reimagined next normal in terms of the organization. In these studies, which you probably have seen some of this, from global research companies, they also have, of course, other next normal scenarios in terms of the market, the consumer behavior, the regulations, supply chain. But for this webinar, I am focusing on the organization. So the key question is, how fast is your organization moving? And has COVID-19 accelerated that change, or will continue to accelerate that change? That is the challenge for most organizations and businesses at this time. So those are some of the key insights and what will look like as the next normal, in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic crisis after all this have normalized, so to speak. Let's now go into the second section in terms of looking at what are the issues that we face in this initial stage of business as usual, and then what are the more complex issues that might lie ahead. Are we ready for them? What are the steps that we should take? And as I mentioned, I will share about the Singapore Solidarity and Resilience Plan. So we have been facing a lot of the business as usual issues, right? Most companies are now working from home, but we are all trying to operate business as usual. The key questions or issues that most of us are facing now are, how do I protect my people? How do I ensure transparency with customers? How do I stabilize my supply chain? And how do I ensure working capital? So these are big issues, and we're probably doing well in terms of handling them. But if we have not planned and prepared for this could really be very, very challenging for the businesses. And they are. In fact, this is just the initial issue. There will be a tsunami of more complex issues that lie ahead. One of which is already happening, is economic recession. And so, as I mentioned, World War II, since World War II, this is probably the biggest demand drawdown. So do we have a plan to survive that puts everything on the table? That is the big question. The other complex future issue is the return to work. So when we return to work, are we ready for that? What will it look like? And how can I make sure that I don't endanger my people? So going back to that return plan that I shared earlier, and hearing from at the global level, things that countries are doing, such as the one that I talked about in Germany, it shows that there's really an important need, to plan for this return, to build up organizational readiness and the resilience. And finally, that tsunami of the new normal, which could look very different from the world that we know today. For example, if distancing will be the new norm, how will the managers and leaders relate with each other at work, in social setting? How will we communicate to our teams? How will we express our empathy, and how will we develop relationship, motivate them in the virtual world? It could look very different. There are also new things emerging. For example, the contact-free economy is emerging in areas like e-commerce, telemedicine, and automation. I was just talking with a friend yesterday and also today, because in preparation for this webinar, I've been trying to catch up with friends as to how they're doing in their companies. And one of them said, he works in a big multinational bank. He said that not many of them used to work from home, but given this new situation in Singapore, we call it the circuit breaker. We're now having a circuit breaker, which is the version of the ECQ in the Philippines, and of course, lockdown in other countries. He said that the bank has now provided them all with the infrastructure to work from home. They have increased their, platforms and the technology investments, and so they have made it easy for employees to work from home. They've also developed an internal site, such that they can still all share stories, that they can still see what's happening, and it's like being in a pantry or being in in the same place in the hallway like they used to, and they can hear from their managers and leaders in that internal site. This morning I was talking with a friend because he said he wasn't feeling well, and he said that one of the things that they have also been doing now is a teleconsult. So there are apps available now where they would consult with the doctors. Obviously, these are more of the GP, general practitioners, and they would consult, and from there, medicines will be delivered to their locations. So you now have this application. So areas such as automation, work from home, e-commerce, telemedicine, what will this mean for the business and for our teams, for our employees? And so these big changes that are happening, what do they all mean for the organization, for the business? So then the next big question is, what steps can we do? What steps can we take as managers and leaders, who I believe most of you are in this webinar. So number one, of course, would be to continue to support and protect employees in this brave new world. It's the VUCA world, as we say. And primary to that would be to continue to protect them from this pandemic, because as the experts have said, it will still continue. And we don't want to have a wave 2 of this lockdown, of this ECQ. And so it's very important that as it's still evolving, we have to continue with the policies, of how to protect our employees. Policies for travel, for work for home, for physical distancing at work, all of this should be in place. Interruptions should be considered, because making a mental separation when you're working in a sometimes chaotic home life is tough. Workers are actually finding that they don't have the skill to do that, to be successful in a remote work environment, because they've just been used to being in their office and in a structured setting. So, and they worry, some employees worry that staying remote could make them less valuable, especially in this economic recession times. It's very important for managers and leaders to optimize a balanced communication approach. Companies need to increase the communication, balancing the needs of the business with the expectation setting and morale building. And with this, of course, what comes to mind would be to ensure that we have a communication plan, and specifically for this purpose, a crisis communication plan, and have a crisis communication team, and within that, a spokesperson. Of course, we can have another webinar for such, but if you don't have that yet, it's very, very important to have a crisis communication plan, strategy, and a team and spokesperson. It's very important for managers and leaders to stay in control and to communicate calmly during the crisis. There are just a couple of tips that I will be sharing in terms of communicating calmly and in control. Because as leaders, we will continue to make decisions amid the uncertainty, amid a VUCA world. So 5 C's: concerns, clarity, control, confidence, competence. Concerns, we should continue to focus on the needs and concerns of our employees. Clarity, we have to make sure we leave no room for improper assumptions or best guesses. Control, of course, we have to remain in control and stick to the message. We need to have a message, and everyone in the organization should stick to that. Confidence, okay. Of course, the message must assure the employees that actions are being taken in everyone's interest. And competence, of course, we have to deliver what we say to them. There is also this pause, assess, anticipate, act approach that can be taken. As we continuously face changes, we have to also continuously pause, assess, anticipate, and act. And this will help leaders to maintain a state of deliberate calm and avoid overreacting to new information. The other important thing that we need to do would be to maximize engagement and productivity for those who are work from home. There is a survey done among China workers, before the pandemic, before the outbreak, and then at the start of the outbreak, and also at the end of that, when they started returning to work. And there were studies that showed their energy actually went down because of 3 things: the blurred boundary between work and life, and the anxiety deepening during the pandemic. The telecommuting, which was unsuitable for some of the workflows in the office, was also a big driver for that reduction in the energy level. And so what has been done, and which can be replicated, and these are the advices, again, that we can do to maximize engagement and productivity in terms of those who are still working from home. Provide psychological safety, communicate work from home tips to the people. There are 4 levers here that we will see: people, structure, process, and technology. In terms of the structure, to define clear objectives and key results, and then to also allow high degree of autonomy, because we are remote, we are by ourselves in the office, sometimes that conversation where we can just go to our boss at work is not there anymore. Of course, we can still call, we can have a video call, but it's a different setup. And so these 2, in terms of the people and the structure, would be very, very important. Establish a clear cadence. I've been working from home in the last 11 years. We do have our service office, but I've been most of the time working from home, working on site, working with customers, working on project sites. But other than that, I would usually be at home, working from our service office if needed. It's very important to put a structure. Very, very important. Because it's very easy to be pulled to different directions, again, the family setup, the chores and all that is very easy to get pulled in different directions. So define a clear and integrated workflow. That is very important. And lastly, technology. I shared to you a couple of examples that have been happening here in Singapore based on my talks with some friends and colleagues. And there are technologies, digital tools, new media that are available to address specific work needs. We need to set up an effective, ergonomic, digitally enabled remote working environment. What else can we do? We can plan for the crisis. Okay, and I'm going to show now a traditional crisis planning method where The stage one is establishing a crisis team. Normally, of course, we apply there the stakeholder management. The stage two is to identify the key risks, and tools like what if, scenario analysis, risk impact probability are used. Stage three is developing that plan, the crisis plan. Again, crisis communication strategy is very important in this. And the stage four is planning for a full recovery. And in here, those who are in the HR, those who are in the management leadership, may want to consider post-crisis services such as counseling, outplacements, and so on. Now, let me go back to that concept of the 5R nerve center. There is a concept there which is called the plan ahead team, wherein they take the studies or the results from the reimagine the new norm and plan ahead for that new norm. And that is being very proactive. In fact, that it says here that it's enabling management leadership to make that appropriate decision faster than the rate at which the environment evolves. So you are ahead of that tsunami. You know, you can react or respond faster. So in summary, as leaders and managers, we need to be agile. We need to proactively plan and act fast to achieve our present and future goals. We can't change the direction of the wind, but we can adjust our sails to always reach our destination. Let me now show this video from Singapore. DPM Heng, Deputy Prime Minister Heng, said, best response to COVID-19 pandemic is to build resilience in economy and society. And this is just a 1 minute, 20 plus seconds video to show what's been done in Singapore. Well, that was what was called the resilience and solidarity budget. And we've had two already. They have topped up our support. So it's nice to be here in Singapore at this point in time, you know, during this crisis. But of course, we share in all the, all the sadness as well. And we try to help as much as possible. Okay. Let me go on from here. And close that section and now go into what must we do to build organizational capacity for continuous change. You know, this is probably the important part at the personal level. This is what we can do, you know, because the first two would be at the global level, at the management leadership level, and then now here would be some of the things we can do at the personal level, or even, you know, as a manager, as a leader. It's time to change how we change. You know, to be prepared for the VUCA world, we need to create change-ready employees. So that's us, and we need to create change savvy managers. That's us, right? So for those of us who are managers. So the key to building capacity is creating change ready people, change ready employees and managers. In this final part, I will look into the model that we at POWERinU use in our change management workshop. We call it the Manager's Change Model. It's based on the US based Association for Talent Development, ATD. This is how the Manager's Change Model looks like. So it's in 4 phases. Phase 1 is assessing the situation, where you need to start at the beginning and ensure change fundamentals are in place, and that we have to make sure that organization is ready. So there are assessment tools, of course, that we can use for this. Accept leadership accountability is the second phase. This is when change management requires us all to be leaders. Leaders go beyond using the basic tools to manage change, and to minimize distraction and control the outcome. Leaders are the drivers. We are accountable for the multiple complex changes on the horizon, just like that tsunami of complex issues. So as leaders, we communicate, we manage the relationship throughout the organization, and we act as role model for others. The third phase is attaining implementation progress. So progress is both in terms of process and in terms of people focus. So this is really in terms of involving and engaging the team to generate improvement. And lastly, advancing to future initiatives. A change-savvy manager is constantly preparing for that next change that is most certainly on the way, just like what we expect now after this COVID-19 crisis and ECQ. I'll focus on this last 3, the phase 4, advancing to future initiatives. Institutionalize the changes, evaluate the results, and build capacity for continuous change. So we've been using the metaphor of the sailboat, as you have seen probably in some of the images I used here. The sailboat is made up of many parts, but there are 5 parts that we will utilize here. And I'd like my question here with this slide is, which part are you in this model, in this sailboat, and can you develop, or if not, can you develop one part or one role, and if you can develop all, that is the challenge to you as a leader. Now, let me go very quickly to these 5 parts. The sail instigates or create the change. And it's like an engine that keeps things moving forward and produce the results quickly. The rudder helps the boat stay on the right track by being in touch with the environment and ensuring a focused journey. The tiller steers toward the goal. It navigates around the obstacles and problems and helps maintain direction. The hull, with its symmetric shape, the hull balances the boat and reduces the drag as it moves forward. So it holds the components and the sailing team together. And the compass shows the direction relative to the environment and orients the journey's progress. It is precise and it helps envision the big picture. So which one are you? And can you develop in one or all? That is the challenge. The other key important part of this model is the resistance to change. There are many that we can name off, in terms of resistance, as causes of resistance. But according to a study of Cantor's 10 reasons people resist change, there are top 2 reasons: the loss of control and the excess uncertainty, which are the top 2 that we are experiencing actually in today's COVID-19 crisis. We have lost control about so many things. We don't know when we will return to, we don't know what's going to happen at work, we don't know what's going to happen in the economy, and so on. And there's that excess uncertainty. So it's very important that we address these top 2 reasons, for resistance to change. Institutionalizing change. So that's a big word, you know. John Cotter, who is considered, you know, a guru in this aspect, in this area, said that for the change to be institutionalized, find the roots for your change. And in fact, it should go beyond the roots. When we plant trees, they have good roots, but they will die if we don't take care of them, right? So like a tree, we want to keep the roots growing and healthy. And John Cotter said that to achieve this, we have to anchor new approaches in the culture. So the challenge is to ensure that the change effort continues to grow and become part of the culture. Evaluating the change result is very important because we need to make sure that this that we learn, you know, from the good and the not so good, the mistakes, the successes. We need to create that valuable information and the lessons learned to take us to the next level, to the next normal, in that, you know, successfully in that next normal. And so we have to evaluate the impact, the process, and of course, evaluate the leaders, you know, that the people are responsible for managing the change. These are, I'll show this all in the interest of time. I'll show this all now, but these are 8 practical operational mechanisms in place. Examples only, you're not limited to this, but these are things that can help build the capacity for continuous change. And so I'd like to end this by saying we need to create a successful culture of change. There will be a tsunami of complex issues. We need to ensure that our organizations has plans in place so the workforce can manage numerous change initiatives simultaneously in the next normal or new normal. We can't stop the wave, but we can learn to surf. With that, thank you very much. And I invite you to just take 1 minute or less to answer this question as well. What floats your boat? What ideas and actions do you take away from this webinar? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Appreciate that very much. And I believe Mac earlier announced that in the interest of effective time management, what we'd like to do is request all of our participants to park or chat their questions for Elaine or any queries or areas of interest it might have sparked in you. And we will defer opening up the floor for Elaine to answer questions after we have heard from Jeremy. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is just very quickly introduce Jeremy so that we can go straight into the heart of his presentation. So who is Jeremy Blain? Right, he's the Chief Executive for Performance Works International, an organization that has helped organizations, executive boards, leaders, and teams succeed in the digital climate amidst disruption, opportunity, and uncertainty. Certainly a thought leader and commands an extensive experience as a transformational leader and advisor at the board level globally, and has operated on an international basis to launch successful businesses and to turn underperformance into excellence. He helps managers, leaders define strategies to implement digital and human transformations and utilizing a unique co-created and award-winning ticking clock model. Jeremy actually is proven at all stages of the business life cycle, from startup to internationalization, raising profiles and profits throughout. And we're pleased to say that Jeremy has been recognized by his industry peers and customers and named Global Game Changer of the Year for 2019 in the ACQ5 Global Awards. So with that, Jeremy, we'll turn over to you. I'll stop sharing, and the floor is over to you, Jeremy. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, June. and a very warm welcome to everybody here. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon to you. A good morning from a very frosty, cold UK, as it happens here today. We are all living in unprecedented times. We are seeing day by day new news, new frightening news. We're getting used to the word that some of the words that we used to use over the last year to mean something different, meaning something quite new now, like the word disruption. We're being disrupted like no time before. So much is happening here and so much is driving change that, based on what Elaine is saying, is we've got a challenge. We had a challenge before, but we've got a new challenge moving forward. For me, it's beyond change. Right now, we're looking for many organizations and governments really in the world to drive a new manifesto almost. What does the new normal look like? And that's what I'd like to do today for you. I'd like to talk about unprecedented times. And I am not talking about where we are now. I'm talking about where we were. We were already in unprecedented times, a time of transformation. We have moved into a time of disequilibrium and challenge through COVID-19. And disequilibrium is the new word for disruption, I'm reliably informed, which is the unbalancing of things, to an extent that it really has to drive a shift within our mindset first, and then how we might act. And then we're moving into the new normal. Please feel free to connect with me per below to continue the discussion, because I'm all about this right now. So less than 10 weeks ago, where were we? I'm going to argue that we were in unprecedented times anyway. We were in a stage of digital transformation. So digital transformation was something that we would hear every day in the workplace. For me personally, I think it was an outdated terminology because it's so much more than just digital transformation. It's the digital and human transformation components together. It was whole cultural shifts. It's how organizations adopt digital, do different business differently, and adapt a culture to the digital era or Industry 4.0. To illustrate that point, I want to show how those kind of things linked within this time of transformation. First of all, around digital, many organizations were on the transformational journey, but incredibly, many have not been. So many have been struggling with the transformation itself. Often that is an issue at leadership level. Leaders, from a survey that I did around the state of digital transformation in 2019, 40% of worldwide leaders that we had surveyed were not ready mentally, but also didn't have the capabilities and skills. So therefore, how can you define and drive strategy and then implement successfully without that, when also you're coping with all of these things that you see on the screen? There are many things that are in place with digital transformation. Those that are failing are looking at digital transformation purely as a technology question. But it's so much more than that. It's how it integrates into the soul, the body of our organizations, and impacts the whole, the human as well. We were already dealing with the unprecedented shifts that may come in this decade, the 2020s, which was the advent of 5G. Now, 5G is a technology which was going to unleash the power of, let's say, artificial intelligence, robotics, because it's far more powerful than what we've got now. The increased bandwidth means that we can do more. We can evolve the AIs that we have in our phones, in our businesses, etc. And I think the one of the key pieces that is really key here is that organizations really weren't looking at this many organizations weren't looking at it anymore than being an opportunity to do more with what we had. So digital is one side, the human side is another. You add these two things together, we've got a different workplace happening as well. We have broadening diversity lenses day by day, not just our traditional ones, but it's also how we're moving forward in terms of embracing a different style of workforce. This was before we got to now. We know that one of the biggest trends out there in the 2020s is the rise of the blended workforce. I've just done a piece of research on that as well. And by 2025, what that research was telling us was that 40% of our global workforce for every company will be made up of independent workers and remote from the offices. That drives a few things. It drives the tension and opportunity between those who are digitally nomadic and capable versus those who are still working traditionally. It drives a different way that we communicate internally. When you put these two sides of the same transformation, as I would argue, together, there are a few things that needed to happen as we approach the 2020s in organizations. We needed to see a mindset shift. We needed to see a new culture driving in our organizations that was appropriate for now. New measures of success, measures of social impact be driven by purpose, not necessarily our vision and mission. So many organizations like Microsoft, Essilor at global level thinking about what really is the core purpose. And we're seeing much, much more now, because much more is, as we entered the 2020s, there was much more talk about wellness, mental health and happiness in the workplace as drivers of engagement, of retention, of productivity, all of those kind of things. That was then, of course. Those organizations that thrived in this situation, this transformed industry 4.0 environment that we're all finding ourselves in as we entered the 2020s, are serial reinventors. And the summary of this slide, and while there are many technology companies on here, they don't have to be, like DBS Bank, for example. There are two key things that are happening here. The first of all is that organizations are embracing the cloud. So things are being moved up into the cloud and creating ecosystems. So away from systems and platforms, which are individual elements, which then can be linked together through open APIs, which for those of you going through that in your businesses, I'm sure, you know, this can be really tricky. My department over here is using this system, this department's over there using that. We're not talking together. How do we extract the data? The shift right now is into ecosystems so that everything talks together. It enables our overall organization. It supports our people in the jobs that they're doing, but it doesn't overwhelm them or get in the way of it. And then you add to that what we would need to do with our customers, then the two ecosystems of the customer and ours can also start to sit together to get closer to customers. And start looking beyond customer experience and into customer journeys. So going along with the customer, not responding to certain things as they're happening as an ad hoc. Those traditional companies that are transforming are learning rapidly from here, and they're learning two key things for success in the transformational era that we entered into in the 2020s. The first is speed, and the second is about perfection. And that point is about not being perfect, the need to not to be perfect. So I'm going to use Ping An Insurance as a great example. Ping An, the financial institution, banking, insurance in China, very, very big. The co-CEO encapsulated it in this. Those of you that are in the industry, you'll know this company. Those of you don't, I would urge you to go and look on the web at the case study. This is a great example of a transformed organization that in one small way, for example, roadside assistance in China. My car breaks down. It used to take me 3 hours just to get through to the customer services, 3 weeks to process things. Right now it's down to 6 minutes, the whole process. Roadside assistance, an answer straight away, assistance on the way. So for this quote here, speed is of the essence. And you know what is that if you're not fast enough getting out there and willing to take a little bit of risk and experiment, a 70% solution can beat you. So a 70% solution is version 1. We all have apps on our smartphones. We have a new app one day, the next day we suddenly get an app update for it. That's version 1.1. Acceptable failure is the norm right now, in a way of looking at it. So we can evolve as we're going. So the speed of our actions and the solution that we can be happy with to move and evolve as we go is a new mindset, but B, a really important competitive advantage element. One of the problems is that many organizations who are entering into this don't know what they don't know, and it is a catalyst for more rapid failure. So what we're finding is that strategy definition is happening okay, where the real issue is strategy implementation. And according to Forbes and IBM, in surveys since 2017 through to 2019, they're saying that 84% of digital transformations are failing. They're failing because there is the human element, which is one of them is the leadership isn't ready. The second is the organization isn't ready. And secondly, the execution plan isn't robust enough because it's too narrow in its focus. And then suddenly it grinds to a halt. And that is driving unprecedented times. Even before we got to where we are now with COVID-19, we were seeing that the failure rate of companies was being affected hugely. If you just look at the S&P 500, for example, the failure rate of companies moving from, if you like, a duration of 67 years to an average of 15 years today. Some very big names that you see here and some very well-known names you see here. No such thing as too big to fail anymore. This is where we were. The real issue for me around this is a mindset and the way we used to do things. It's a 20th century mindset. We have legacy processes and systems that many organizations deal with that haven't been through the transformation. And we can't have that thinking in the 21st century because it's a different world. It's the digital world. And the rapidity of how business is moving forward, of change, new competitors in your working space, disruption, etc. It's absolutely changing. And in fact, you know, we're just seeing a lot of these things almost going out of date as rapidly as they're talked about. Disruption, it's not disruption anymore. It's an unbalancing thing. It's disequilibrium. It's not digital transformation. It's whole business model transformation. It's not the future of work. The future of work is now, and absolutely now, right now. So this, for me, encapsulates it beautifully. It is really the need to change our thinking and think about where we are. And that, for me, is almost accentuated by the fact that we haven't even talked about the human shift yet. A lot of this has been driven by digital and different ways of working, but let's just consider the human shift, the gig economy, the growth of the independent workforce, marketplaces, the shared economy as it was coming into as well, buying and selling services. My whole business is based on 100% contingent services. So even my team, in inverted commas, permanent, are retained. I'm embracing this. I use talent from all over the world because I don't have to look within a 20-kilometer radius of where my office is anymore for my talent. My talent pool is global. And that's a key mentality shift. Just in the US alone, according to smallbusiness.net, there are 60 million people now employed as independent workers. Their prediction within the next 5 years that would double to 120 million and more. If you multiply that over the world, then that is really, that's something that fundamentally shifts the way that we should look at the workforce. Add it to what I said before, is that in the survey I've done as well, by 2025, independent workers could represent as much as 40% of our overall workforce. This is what we're calling the blended workforce. That includes your permanent resource, your remote permanent resource, your part-time resource, contractors, independent workers for ad hoc work, and other external stakeholders. It is much more than now. And for me, it requires a brand new human capital management framework. And I don't see many leaders within this space understanding this trend and how fast it is, and doing something with their organization to create the new rules of the road, because the old rules of the road don't work anymore. That's 20th century thinking. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we were. So where we are now is more about this, what I'm talking about, this disequilibrium and accelerating transformation. This is being driven, as we know, by the times that we're in now. Elaine talked about the VUCA world. That's another one of those things that we're talking about a lot right now. I'm now moving from VUCA to VUCA-R. My R is revolutionary. That is what I'm adding to volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and revolutionary. We are beyond evolution, which is where we were coming just 10 weeks ago, which is we're just continuing on the track of transformation. We have now supplanted that with a revolution. And that is being driven by the unfortunate pandemic that we're in. And it is forcing organizations to think differently. We're also being bombarded. You know, there is an infodemic as well as a pandemic, and we're having to filter what this means. Lots of different countries, lots of different companies have a different view. There are different messages, and we've got to find our way forward. Organizations are in a really tough situation. Myself and MD-POWERinU, of course, you know, we're training companies, consulting companies. A lot of what we did and do is a lot of what we did. You see, I'm changing my thinking already. A lot of what we do and did was face-to-face. But we're having to shift that rapidly into thinking about what do virtual classes look like, webcasts, webinars, embracing video and working remotely. This is challenging all companies, and it is a revolution. And within any revolution, mindset is key. Do we see it as a barrier, or do we see it as enabler, as doing something different? And to illustrate the point, this is, I'm going to use where most of us are right now as a good example of accelerated transformation, which of course is an obvious one, which is all about remote work. But first, let's just talk about this acceleration. First of all, because of the remote working revolution that we have right now, the very nature of where we are and what has happened within the next 8 weeks has started to accelerate digital transformation. You cannot work remotely by just trying to replicate the office at home, or in it. Well, we can't even use co-working spaces at the moment, but your workspace. We're having to find new ways of working which are enabled by appropriate technology that helps us communicate, collaborate, and even engage with our customers more effectively. This is beyond what we might have as our apps, and using tools like we're using here, which is Zoom, Zoom Pro, GoTo Suite, the Web Suite, Blue Jeans, you name it. There's a bunch of these technologies, but it's really key to embrace it. The workforce and workplace is going to be accelerated. So the trend that I talked about 40% of independent workers being part of our blended workforce by 2025, and the remote working or flexible working and remote working trends that we've seen will, of course, naturally accelerate. And this is because of something that will happen and is starting to happen already in this fast-paced shift that we're seeing, is that it is starting to drive a think differently mentality within many organizations about what is possible, what they thought before 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, and what they're now thinking in terms of the possibilities about how to mobilize and utilize the workforce in a more productive and healthy way. This is happening a lot. Experimentation. We're not getting this right all the time. I'm sure many of you in your organizations are in the thick of this in thinking about how we're enabling our people to work productively while getting the wellness side in place. Because what we've got to understand is where we are now. We're in unusual times, and I'll come back to that in a second. But fail fast, fail early, and failing often is happening, and that's no bad thing, because it's giving many more traditional organizations the opportunity to do it because they absolutely have to. There is no choice anymore. It seems that coming into 2020s, transformation had been a choice, had been a roadblock in terms of mindset for some people, but now people are being shoved off the edge and said, no, we've just got to do it. New ways of working are accelerating as well, new ways to engage our customers. This is driven by where we all are right now, how we engage, how we deliver our services. We are rethinking that and reshaping it. And it's no surprise. New questions are being asked. How do we do this? What does this mean for our future if this continues? How long will COVID-19 go forward? I've been in lockdown in the UK here for almost 4 weeks already. And that 4 weeks has been a really interesting journey for me, because I have been able to absolutely solidly say that I've been able to evolve my own organization, offer a different suite of services, create new services which are relevant to where organizations are finding difficulty now, and learn myself by stepping off that edge and experimenting. And so it's actually giving me a whole brand new kind of idea set about what I can do moving forward. So according to BBC Capital, this is on their website last week, business transformation over the next 6 months will accelerate by 60%. That is, as we would say in the UK, from the Ministry of the Obvious, but as a key number, I think it absolutely quantifies that this has really pushed organizations to start making the change. What's interesting as an example of this is where we are in terms of remote working. Now, here's a really interesting piece of data for you from Small Business Genius. And by the way, I saw the question before that was on the screen. I will be sending a copy of this deck to the American Chamber, to Mac, who can share this with you. Absolutely no problem. Up until 10 weeks ago, 44% of companies around the world would not allow remote working. It wasn't allowed. It will never work in our industry. This is not how we do business. Nothing can substitute the water cooler conversations that we have, or the face-to-face interactions with customers. We're not going to do it. Fast forward 10 weeks, 80% of over 80% of those companies are now remote working, and they're finding new ways to work. It's really interesting, isn't it? What people needed is something fundamentally to shift that thinking and mindset. And we had something very unfortunate hit in terms of pandemic, but because of where the world has been in this last, or even since the global financial crisis in 2008, I think we can expect more uncertainty, more revolutionizing of the way we're thinking and the way that we do things going forward, even from this crisis. But one thing I would say, it is not the new normal as yet, because I loved this tweet from one of the people that I follow, because many of those companies that didn't allow remote working are now experiencing remote working in a way which is not normal remote working. We have, most of us are working from home. We have distractions. We have pets walking across our keyboards. We have kids in the background. I have conference calls and virtual classes with my customers, and I see their kids in the background. It's okay. It's normal. Some are taking extreme measures, I would say. But each to their own, okay? But this is where we are. We're finding ways to work, and it's not quite the new normal yet. Another tweet that I really like, though, if I look outside of those companies that are now starting to remote work, those that already did, for example, are realizing what some of the benefits can be. So if we kind of ignore where we are right now, just from a global pandemic perspective, but look purely at the trend of remote working, then what this tweet I like from Chris talked about was, look, just a quick comparison. We're saving $1,200 per month potentially per person by going remotely. Like I was saying before, we're hiring the best people on the planet. Most importantly for me, though, we're moving from a more synchronized 20th century way of working into a more asynchronous way of working. So synchronous is, it is timed, it's based on an order of things, processes that we might have internally, dependencies that we might have. Asynchronous is I'll do it at the time that I want, I'll work when I want, more flexibly. Some of us prefer to work in the evening, some of us don't. Some of us are more productive in the morning, some of us more productive in the afternoon. It plays much closer to personal biorhythms as much as where we're comfortable with. It doesn't need to happen for dependencies. Work can happen in parallel. It can be more nomadic in terms of how we work and thinking, but then coming together collectively as the whole. 25 days per year commuting is on average in the world is about 600 hours. Okay. I think in Metro Manila, it could be a little bit more than that from my experience in Jakarta. But 600 to 1,000 hours. Let's talk about that. The key question is, if I could give you back 600 hours to do something differently and to work productively, what could you do? Well, of course, we could do a lot more, not just in terms of our job role. We could do more to contribute to the business as a whole. We could start to take part in special projects. And this is the beauty of what is being unleashed right now. This terminology that we've had in business for a long time, leadership at all levels. We've been trying to drive that, but we've never quite got there. Here is the opportunity. For me, I'm actually writing a book about that, and I'm calling it Unleashing the Inner CEO. There is no better time to think about how do we unleash the inner CEO of our people so that they're contributing productively in their job role and delivering, but also starting to do a lot of different things and taking ownership for things collaboratively with others in the organization. It starts to really break down the barriers. Where we are in remote working now, I mentioned this, is that many organizations are still not ready. Many of you on this call, I'm sure, are going through this and are battling with this. Some of you are making a lot of progress, I'm absolutely sure as well. I work with a gentleman called Joe Pelissier, and we together with the Remote Work Pros, and we're doing, as you can imagine, the business has got a little bit better over the last few weeks, I must say. But we've been trying to analyze what the stages of remote work are. And the first thing that I would say is that, you know, as we evolve here, remote working is not the right terminology, because this will be the new normal. So we're remote from what? That indicates that we still have thinking that we're remote from an office. So the CEO of WordPress calls it distributed working. We call it, Joe and I call it connected working. We don't even talk about the geographical element. We're just connected workers. Doesn't matter where we are. We're geography free, we're workplace free. One of the problems is that this is like, you know, Elaine was talking about change management being key, and the key to change management, it all starts with mindset. And with any change curve, level one of this remote working is denial. I mean, you go back 10 weeks. No, you know, it won't be so bad in our country, this. We won't have to do so much. Let's just business as usual right now. Well, look, 10 weeks later, where we are. That denial has been rapidly moving into level 2, and the red dot represents where we are and where many organizations are globally. We've just finished a survey on this. I don't have the data yet, but we're looking at, you know, how globally remote working is being embraced. What are the plus points and what are the issues people are facing? Office replication is the biggest issue and the biggest mistake many companies are making. They're trying to just do the job that we need to do in the office in the way that we did it in the office, but doing it remotely. And that's driving two things. First of all, a lack of rules of the road and organizational direction, but it's also driving for individuals a lack of understanding of their role. Management, for example. One of the traps that some managers are falling into is micromanagement and scheduling as many online meetings as possible because they feel that's the way to do business. It's not happening everywhere, of course, but I exaggerate to make the point. Individually, those that are embracing this new way of working, a more flexible way of working, a more asynchronous way of working, are having the best time. However, those that are not are experiencing, so a company called buffer.com did a survey and said that 1 in 5 remote workers are experiencing loneliness. And when organizations are moving to remote work, they're looking at the very practical natures of remote work. But I would argue that every organization owned by HR or human capital management must have a wellness strategy around this as well. So office replication won't work because also as a remote worker that's not used to it, there is for some people that you find some anecdotal evidence to suggest that there's a guilt reflex. I can't leave my desk between the hours of 9 till 6 because what if my manager calls me, or what if somebody needs something? What if I get an email? What if I get a text? What are they going to say? But this is nonsense. This is not how we should work. This is not a remote working session, but remote working is all about finding new productive ways to work. For those of you that are looking, I could recommend one key structural element, which is just absolutely fabulous, called the Pomodoro technique. P-O-M-O-D-O-R-O, Pomodoro technique. Just look it up on Google and have a look. Structured work. As we move from office replication, though, we start to evolve some best practices internally. And almost, I mean, Joe and I are looking at that and thinking maybe we should use the word next, not best practices, because these practices will become probably for some organizations how we will work moving forward. Because the very progressive organizations who are experiencing this and who are at level 4 and level 5 evolved are finding that they're not just finding these kind of cost savings, but they're finding huge productivity savings as well. So, for example, Flex Jobs in 2019 did a survey with 7,000 remote workers. 65% of them said that they're more productive working remotely than they are working in the office because there are less distractions, less meetings, less politics. Everything is more structured in terms of how they collaborate, and the focus for the organization is much narrower. And that's a symptom of where that is. So very interesting piece that this can really work. So the brave new world for me is evolving. The new normal is evolving, but it's not there yet. We are still in the revolutionary phase of this massive shift that is happening, in our mentality of what is possible and what we need to do, but also in terms of the need to think and do differently from governmental level right through to company level and through to individual levels. Those of us that are now working from home, and some of us that aren't possible to working from home. In the UK, and I know it's similar in certain countries, we have a word called furlough, which is people being sent home and the government is paying 80% of their monthly salary. But those people who are furloughed are not allowed to do any work for the organization if they're going to take a benefit from this. So it's almost bringing back what the discussion was called was in the 1960s in the US, which was universal basic income, an evolved state of things. But the new normal is evolving, and according to at macro level, according to a brand new survey which I really like from McKinsey, these are the 4 key points that they're saying in terms of as we move through the next 6 months to 9 months, this is what we need to have at macro level. So we saw what Singapore were doing now from Elaine in the video that she showed. Most national economies are not just looking about when they're going to lift lockdown. So Germany saying May, for example, America saying the same, but that seems to be in a worse position than most at the moment in terms of acceleration of the pandemic. So as the national cope with it here, the local, if you look on the right hand side for a map of the Philippines, for example, you've not just got kind of the big ticket national picture, you've got how are the local state battles happening, how are they handling it, and what are they going to do to then align to the national plan. Then how do we prepare to get back to work safely? What does it look like? So when these lockdowns are lifted, are we going to go straight back into working as we were? Or will we be socially distanced a little bit more still? Will we be embracing remote working as, you know what, possibly a really good way of working moving forward, with punctuated points in time where we all get together potentially? One thing is for certain from this within McKinsey's survey is that the pioneering of the new normal will happen in the Asia Pacific region. Absolutely no question. And having lived and worked there for 7 years, absolutely agree with it. And obviously, because of the more progressive state of the pandemic, we're starting to see some of that new normal coming through and how it is coming through. So for me, the need for rapid revolutionary transformation has never been so great. So I'm just going to take you through 4 key tips from my point of view in terms of doing a lot of research on this about what needs to happen before I go. First of all, organizations need to rapidly adopt digital. If they were struggling up to 10 weeks ago with what we were calling then digital transformation, what have you, then they're far more behind the curve than they would like to be right now. We have to think more about the future. So what is our vision for the digital era? What is the leadership mindset that now needs to be in place that embraces the new way of working enabled by digital? As we work remotely, what does centricity look like? And centricity in 3 ways. First of all, with our culture and how our culture evolves. How do we evolve our culture for the digital era? How do we engage our customers in the digital era and remotely more, engage them, handle conversations and negotiations remotely? How do we keep business going? And final piece of centricity is around the operational nature of the business. Let us embrace ecosystems beyond the normal systems and platforms that we've got now, so that everything talks together. We need a more collaborative space and technologies that enable that, because we're all remote. If we do that well and start to embrace a digital way of working, which includes data-driven decision-making, predictive analytics to help us understand what this very uncertain decade is going to be, we need to be future ready. Then we can move beyond predicting the future to prescribing our own future. Second point is a need for a brand new manifesto for human capital management from my point of view. And I've coined it with another business partner, gig HR. This is a terminology for me, which is right for now. This embraces the rise of the blended workforce, the remote nature of the workforce. So the remoteness and the mix of it requires a very, very different thinking, the new rules of the road, a brand new framework for how to do that, and how you then blend the human and the digital together. So they're not just enabling people to work remotely, but it is all the mental and physical well-being aspects of working remotely as well, which really many organizations aren't doing enough on from my point of view. The next thing is experiment. What does your business and cost model look like moving forward? Most organizations are challenged financially and operationally right now. So what are the new things new bold initiatives that we can think about that with government help in some cases in the short term, of course, which look at how do we evolve our cost models? For example, if we're now moving to a 90%, let's say, remote working environment, what is that meaning? So we are in an emergency, tough situation right now, but let's not forget that we've got a great opportunity to analyze the data much more rapidly than we used to do. Look at the left-hand side to be future ready, prescribe our future. What is this meaning for our business in digital, human, and economic terms? I talked about unleashing the inner CEO. This is the opportunity to drive ownership right through the organization, break down barriers, avoid the risks of micromanagement and managers not knowing how to manage remotely, and create from them what they really should be doing, which is being great coaches for our remote workers to do more, not just in their job role, but also contribute to the whole. And in all of that, it is rapidly practicing, experimenting, enabling new structures and systems and ways of working and adopting them. It's a much more agile process. And as we're doing that, we need to unlearn our old ways of doing things, even just from 10 weeks ago. I'm not talking about 20th century for even 21st century here. This is just unlearning what we used to do at the beginning of this year and relearning new ways of working now, thinking about how our spaces of work will change and what that means for our future. So a great example of spaces of work, another company that works remotely and has done since the turn of the century is IBM. 40% of their population now work remotely, by the way, so almost half. That's 126,000 people. What it meant for them is that they gained $1.9 billion in selling off a lot of their properties. But the offices that they kept, and because of the remote working mix, saves them on average around $300 million per year globally, just in terms of costs that they would have spent on the office. So this is really an interesting time for organizations to get into the data and look at it. But more importantly, even than that, is to make sure that those where we're now able to start business again and do business, we need to rapidly unlearn the new ways of doing things, relearn and upskill our people, our managers, our leaders in these new ways of working. This is where potentially reverse mentoring comes in beautifully as well. Gen Z and millennials who are already doing some of this in your organization, who can advise on the best technologies, who can advise very quickly on how to do this in the best way, could really help the everybody getting involved in the rapid upskilling. It's not just an HR point. Those would be my 4 key elements, I would say. So from me, I would say thank you very much for your time. I'm going to hand over now back to Mac and go into the Q&A, but please do connect with me.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Elaine. So Mac, back over to you.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful and informative presentation. I guess in a nutshell, we just really need to face the risks. I guess we need to continue to collaborate and work effectively as companies, as teams, and I guess companies should also overcome the disruption or the business transformation about this crisis. Just a few questions from me. This question is for Ms. Elaine. So we were discussing earlier, crisis communications team. So for companies, who will be the composition of a crisis communications team? So who will be from a company?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that question, Mac. And Jeremy might want to answer this as well, but from my perspective, this should the crisis communication team should be represented by the relevant stakeholders, or should have members from the relevant stakeholders, and that's why I mentioned that stakeholder management is one of the best, in fact, the tool that must be used, or approach that must be used when having the crisis communication or crisis planning, for that matter. And so the stakeholders, of course, would vary from business to business, but there should be the leaders, top leaders, executive sponsors, and the heads or representatives of every relevant department affected, of course, or that would have a stake in this, in the business, or in the crisis going on. Because crisis, I mean, not just the COVID-19 crisis, but crisis could be different for every industry or every business. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Elaine. And another one, in this setting, most of the companies, Filipino companies, are now in skeletal force, where others are implementing working mostly
You
it's uh, very difficult right now.
can you repeat the question, Mac?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
there was a break in the audio.
repeat the question. You know, in this setting, like companies are sending work and we're implementing how the employees can avoid friction and conflict, and given the change in communication style and other uh, ways of doing business.
Perhaps you can type up the question. I'm not sure I have understood the whole thing. So if I
Yeah,
suggest if you can just type up.
right. Mac, if you don't mind, while you're typing up that question, if I may just read off from the chat, here's a question that might be both for Elaine or Jeremy. It says the presentation does bring up the lack of good internet. How can we succeed in this new world without good internet?
Like to take that, Jeremy?
Oh, yes, please. We can't. It's not possible. So this is why then emerging technologies like 5G is so important to accelerate right now, because that actually can go beyond if you like, the existing broadband internet infrastructure that is in place. 5G, for example, is 10 times as fast as 4G. What it is unleashing for the new workforce, very interestingly, I did a survey with Generation Z, and they said, and we asked them, what will you, do with your technology when you come to the workplace? This was in the context of 5G coming in. Their number one response, over 63% saying so, is that we will have an AI assistant that can help us do our jobs. So what that will do is not only give us the bandwidth to have discussions like this without being interrupted, but actually do deep work much better. It may avoid having to have access to databases and systems, because our AIs will be far more powerful in the advent of 5G. And beyond 5G, it will exponentially change again when quantum comes in. And so there is, quantum in China and quantum at Googleplex in the US. They're starting to make breakthroughs to take away how normal computing is done and break down the barriers so that so much more can be done through quantum in the quantum space. It releases huge capacity. So for me, it is really important now in the short term that internet infrastructure is boosted, but it is also an organizational need to support your remote workers to make sure they have the right broadband package and to pay for it. Because while you pay for everything at the office, you can't let your employees pay for everything at home, particularly if they have to upgrade their communications plan. Then at global level, the acceleration of 5G technologies will really help kind of get over this problem.
I'm not sure if Mac is back, so I hope you don't mind, Mac. I'll read off the next couple of questions. I think one of them is at least for Jeremy, and the second one might apply for either or both. Jeremy, it says here, 5G technology is known to benefit most industrial sectors and businesses, and I think you talked extensively about that. What do you think would be the substantial effects of 5G to consumers, aside from the increased bandwidth, of course?
Yeah, and in fact, increased bandwidth is the myth around 5G that almost represents the trap that many are falling into. We'll be able to stream more videos and I can play my games, a little bit more. It actually releases everything. What 5G does is unleash what has been termed the Internet of Things. So this moves everything from what we have been used to, which is a series of apps or platforms and interconnected systems, where we're doing different things on. So I have a laptop, a screen, my smartphone here, a microphone, things here. I've got my house, my office, and so on. The Internet of Things is an ecosystem which binds all of that together. So you need one piece of technology, which is enabled by a huge boost in bandwidth and power, which is 5G. And then I can start to manage things far better. My communication, collaboration, my linking with friends, my socializing, management of my home, my life, and my work, all in one place. That is the wonderful thing that 5G will unleash, the Internet of Things.
Thank you, Jeremy. Mark, I'm just going to read off the next question, and please.
Yes, Surgeon, but can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Back over to you.
Okay. I'll just read the question in the Q&A section. So, in this setting, how do you think company employees can avoid conflict or friction among themselves, given the rapid changes in communication and the way we do business? So, anyone can answer this particular question.
Okay, I'll try that, but I'm sure Jeremy has something to say, or maybe even June. I don't, well, the first thing I'm going to say is I don't have, the answer to this, because this is still changing and something new for many of us, or for all of us actually. Although, as what Jeremy has said, many companies have already been working from home. I myself have been working from home for many, many years now. But it will be different when, when we said that the prediction is that majority will be doing this. And for organizations where close interaction is needed, where workflow demands close interaction with each other or with external customers, this will really be difficult. So there should be mechanisms for adapting, for being agile, in terms of communicating internally and externally. There has to be continuous training and development as well, because communicating in the virtual world is very different from face-to-face or in-person communication. So there are tips and techniques, of course, that we can learn how to communicate and how to handle, conflicts and like frictions, as it said here, among employees or among internal but also external customers. And that's a totally, different training that we can go into. In terms of success stories or best practices that I've gathered, because there have been multinationals practicing this, there are still in-person gatherings. It's not limited to just working from home entirely. For example, I have a friend here in Singapore who has been working with a big multinational US. I think, yeah, they're US-based multinational. They work from home, but twice a week, they actually go into the office and meet specific persons and teams, precisely for this reason, that there are things that are best handled or best solved in using face-to-face communication or in-person communication. Okay, so there will be adjustments to the workflow. There will be adjustments to policies. There will be adjustments to processes. As we said, people, technology, process. These are very important levers that we can use so that we can come up with the right mechanisms. And the culture, of course, has to change to be able to accommodate that. That's my best answer at the moment, and perhaps we can also later on share more success stories, share more best practices.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Elaine. Now, for the interest of time, maybe we can jump onto the next question in the Q&A box. This is from an anonymous attendee. So, IoT indeed is a great result of 5G
Hello, Mac. Let me read it off. IoT indeed is the great result of 5G, and as you mentioned, would require more energy. Will there be any possible negative implications from the energy sector?
That's a great question. And we have some cases, you know, a lot of the questions that you've been posing that I've answered here, I do have quite a lot of research on. Some I've done myself and what have you. And one thing I meant to say, if there's anything that I talked about, because there are a lot of different things within the presentation that I did that you'd like more information on, just pop me a comment in the chat box, and I'll do my best to filter that through to the American Chamber, who can then distribute that for you. Very willing to do that. Back to the question. Negative implications for the energy sector. This goes back to where we were 10 weeks ago and where we are right now. So where we were 10 weeks ago, if we looked at, let's say, the energy sector, but it could be another sector, were they rapidly transforming, anticipating and predicting future trends, and prescribing their own future or reacting to what was happening in the moment? So 5G has been on the agenda and on the table for about 4 or 5 years now in terms of concept through to testing and then launch in some countries right now. So you would think that the sectors who are reliant or are going to fuel it would be part of that process, part of that collaborative process, working with the smart energy companies, would be working with the big companies, the big telco companies within the world to think about that. If I just look at some of the manufacturers of handsets, for example, some of the big electronics manufacturers outside of energy, of course, you know, they're close to it, so they know that their handsets need to be compatible and 5G ready, and we're starting to see those coming into the marketplace now, even though the technology isn't there. So you would hope that many organizations, or many of the best organizations within the energy sector, are already ahead of this and are thinking about how that is going to be fueled and what is the new types of energy that needs to be invested in, and that should have been invested in probably, you know, before now, to start driving this forward. And there's you know, lots of different types of energies being explored with, of course, as we know right now. But the other thing that I would say about this is it also goes back to the old term of disruption, is that in other sectors where companies or big companies within sectors like this have not anticipated change, they found that where the problem is lying is not within their traditional competitors, but the new competitors who are finding the niche in the space, who are saying, they're not ready for 5G here, what can we do about it and who can we work with? And starting to think very differently about the business model, how energy can be created, how energy can be served, how energy can be managed minute by minute, etc., etc. So I think there's a number of things that come into play here. And if those energy companies that are more traditional haven't started thinking about this, then honestly, I don't think they'll survive.
Thank you, Jeremy. Eb, I just want to address this to you over, Eb. We actually have one more question left, and Mac has decided to restart his internet, but we're also down to our last 5 minutes, Eb. So we'd like to turn over to you now, as I know you'd like to close this, and we can perhaps take the remaining question offline. Back over to you, Eb. Hear us, Eb? Hey, Eb? Maybe Eb is having some connection issues as well.
Maybe it's just the three of us then.
Let me see if I can just type a question to Eb, because it's now, we're down to, I think, the last three minutes.
Thank you very much, June. I'm ready to make any kind of setback.
Go ahead, Eb. You're on mute, Eb. You're on mute.
Okay, I'm back.
All
Back
right,
to
good.
Dorothy's question about back to Dorothy's question about, and now to the internet, to the bandwidth. I happen to be in a very remote part of the world right now, and the internet's normally not good. Now it's even worse. But no, I was saying earlier, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I hope
Yes.
so. But I was comparing this just as closing comments. It was like watching the American Idol, or watching The Voice, or watching a cook show, and somebody asks the judge, "Well, how was the food?" And what's the judge going to say? "Oh, it sucked." No, it wasn't any good. You know, of course they got. But I have to say that I've watched about 6 or 7 of our classes and our webinars this week, and we definitely saved the best for last. This by far, the best I can say is thank you very much, Elaine and Jeremy, and of course June. By far, I think this is of all the webinars I've attended, today was the most enlightening and educational for me as a manager. So I'd like to say thank you so much for taking the time today. I know normally you would be charging us a fee for this type of presentation, and you did it to help out the American Chamber and our members. So from my heart and from our membership's heart, we'd like to say a big thank you so much for what you've done today. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mac, and maybe they got some other closing comments. But I just want to say we saved the best for last this week. I just hope everybody stay home, stay safe, and we'll get through this.
Thank you, Eb.
Thank you, Eb. Thank you to the American Chamber of Commerce.
All right,
Yes, thank you to AmCham Philippines.
Yes, thank you, Miss Elaine. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Sir June, for this very wonderful and very informative presentation.
Thank you, POWERinU.
And to all our attendees who spent time with us this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. More power.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.